Welcome into Between the Tackles. I'm your host, Michaela Vernava, joined as usual by our analyst, Patriots beat writer, Doug Kyed. Doug, Between the Tackles, that's the new name of our podcast. What do you think?
Cool. I like it. We are Between the Tackles. That's
all right.
What we are.
I'm glad you like it. You know, here in the newsroom, we were bouncing a lot of ideas around. That's what we settled on. I like it because it kind of reminds me of Between Two Ferns, that little segment with Zach Galifianakis. I was always a huge fan of that.
So is this going to be like a parody interview?
I mean, we could try. Make it a little bit like that.
That will be a surprise to our guests.
Now let's stick to football. But yeah, Between Two Tackles is what it's going to be for the 2016 season. So I'm pumped up about that. I'm also pumped up because as the Patriots are getting ready to take on the Arizona Cardinals, we are going to be talking with Kurt Warner a little later in this podcast. So great things in store. But Doug, what is going on down in Foxborough?
There are moves every day. There are trades, non-trades, bunch of stuff going on down here as always.
Never a dull moment. Let's start with the offensive line and Josh Klein. Are you surprised? I mean, that whole thing was kind of weird. He was being traded, and then he wasn't, but now he's gone. So what does that mean for the Patriots offensive line?
Yeah, I'm unsurprisingly surprised, I guess is what I would say, because
makes
I have
total
no
sense.
idea. Yeah, it makes total sense. I have no idea what the Patriots are ever doing on their offensive line. I felt like Logan Mankins was their best offensive lineman in 2013. They traded him in 2014. I thought that Ryan Wendell helped them win a Super Bowl in 2014, and then he was placed on non-football injury and never played in 2015. And I thought that Klein was the most consistent offensive lineman last year, and now he's been released. So I think it just shows how much confidence that they have in guys like Jonathan Cooper, Shaq Mason, Trey Jackson, who's on PUP. And I think it shows that, Cooper and Mason are either healthy or very close to being healthy at this point.
When are they going to start getting some consistency, though, along that line? It seems like things are just up in the air, and building some consistency is pretty important for an offensive line.
I agree, and that's kind of what surprises me about this a little bit, is that say David Andrews goes down with an injury at some point this season. I thought that Josh Klein would be the guy who would either have to move over or just move up into that starting center job. But now it looks like that would probably be Joe Thuney who would fill in at center if Andrews went down. And then that means that you're moving your left guard over to center, and then you have to bring a new guy into left guard, and maybe you're moving your right guard to left guard, then bringing in your right guard. So, yeah, this is just more inconsistency from the offensive line. I think that consistency and some continuity are extremely important, especially for these first four games when you have Jimmy Garoppolo out there, and he's almost definitely going to be playing with a right guard, whether it's Cooper or Mason, that he didn't get a lot of reps with during the preseason. So I don't know. I don't know what they're ever doing out with the offensive line. Bill Belichick seems to know what he's doing, but I don't know. This is one of those situations where you just kind of have to throw your hands in the air a little bit.
Yeah, I'm getting dizzy, so let's move on to defense because they're going to play a huge role in this game against the Cardinals. And they just brought in cornerback Eric Rowe. What do you think about that move?
I liked it. I thought it was a decent amount to give up for him. It's a conditional fourth-round pick that could turn into a third-round pick, depending on how Rowe performs. But it adds some size to the secondary. He's now the tallest member of the Patriots secondary. The Eagles tried to move him to safety. That didn't work. He wasn't fantastic at cornerback last year. So the impression that I get is the Patriots will probably try to continue that move to safety. And if that doesn't work, then they have a tall cornerback who can succeed a little bit in press coverage. So I think that he offers a lot of upside. He was the number 47 overall pick last year, and it adds some much-needed depth at cornerback and at safety next offseason. Malcolm Butler is a restricted free agent. Logan Ryan's an unrestricted free agent. And Deron Harmon is an unrestricted free agent. Those are three, basically, two starters and one borderline starter that you might need to replace. And a guy like Rowe could fill in a number of different positions there.
I know this is such a busy time of year because they dwindle the roster down to the 53-man, and then it's right into week one, and you've got your first game coming up on Sunday. What was the most surprising cut that the Patriots made, do you think?
I guess I'd probably say Josh Klein at this point, but going back to the initial 53 cuts, I think the fact that they released Aaron Dobson and Keyshawn Martin was a bit of a surprise. Once Martin got hurt in that final preseason game, I thought that they might even keep both of those players because I didn't really even consider that they would only carry 4 wide receivers going into the season. So I wouldn't say I was shocked by any cut, but Martin was probably the closest just because he did offer some good depth at that position. I think the issue there was just that he's been so injury prone since he came to the Patriots. He missed time last year. He missed a lot of time during the summer this year, and then he got hurt again in that final preseason game. So at a certain point, I guess you just kind of have to give up on a guy who can't stay healthy.
Yeah, and were you surprised at them keeping both Clay Harbor and A.J. Derby at tight end? Because I was surprised at the wide receiver cuts, but then when I saw they're keeping 4 tight ends, I was like, interesting.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I certainly would not have predicted. I thought that Harbor would be on his way out just because it seemed a little redundant to keep him, James Devlin, and A.J. Derby. But this is also now one of those situations where I kind of look at it as if the Patriots are going to be running a 2 tight end set, then maybe it does make sense to keep just as many wide receivers as they're keeping tight ends. And by keeping Derby and Harbor, that means that they don't need to stash a tight end on the practice squad at this point. So that frees up another spot for either a linebacker or another receiver. So the Patriots have a million different ways of keeping depth on the roster and roster management. I think this is just one of those examples that it's tough to predict what Belichick is going to do as far as roster management goes because he can be pretty creative about it.
Yeah, lots and lots of interesting stuff going on the Patriots offense. And, of course, I was just on Patriots.com looking at the unofficial depth chart, and I have to say it is really weird to look at that depth chart and not even see Tom Brady's name. It's just number 10, Jimmy Garoppolo, followed by Jacoby Brissett. And it's really strange to look at and not see Brady on there.
I agree. It's odd that Brady's also not listed as one of the captains right now.
I know. It's so weird. It is so weird. It kind of, I don't know, it makes you think toward the future that someday this is going to be what it is in New England. But
yep.
For now, for the first month of the season, Jimmy Garoppolo, and he spoke today. What did he have to say as he's getting ready for his regular season debut?
I thought his most interesting quote was just that he said that it's a little bit smoother for him now that Tom Brady isn't taking reps in practice, kind of isn't in the meeting room. And I don't think he meant any harm by those comments. I don't think he meant it in a controversial way or that, Brady gets in the way or anything. But Garoppolo is going to be the starter. So I think it would be much smoother for him to not have another guy taking those starting reps or taking pretty much anything that's related to a starting quarterback, meetings, practice, anything. So I can definitely understand where he's coming from on that. He is the starter. He will be the starter for the first 4 weeks, and there's no one really getting in the way of him doing that at this point.
Well, sounds like a controversy to me.
I'm sure some people will certainly twist it into that. Some radio hosts, certain newspaper writers, yes, I'm sure that will absolutely happen.
Cue the media firestorm.
Yeah.
Doug Kyed started it.
Yeah, it's all my fault.
Yeah. No, obviously that's been already a lot talked about, that alleged rift. I know we hit on it last week, the alleged rift between Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo. But, like you said, it's only natural. He's got to get ready because it's Sunday night. It's, 4 days away?
4 days away now, yeah. Pretty close.
Yeah.
Getting excited for it.
Very soon. Who do you think will be maybe a surprise breakout in this game and really make a difference for the Pats?
I think that there's 2 real candidates, and everyone gets so deep into football at this point that it's almost hard to name breakout candidates because everyone gets talked about. But Trey Flowers, I think, could certainly wind up with a sack, a number of pressures, as he'll probably be the number 3 pass rusher on the team this week since Ninkovich is suspended. I think that Jamal Sheard probably should be ready to play this game, and Chris Long will take the other starting spot. But Flowers as an edge rusher, as an interior rusher, I think that he could definitely provide some pressure. And Chris Hogan at wide receiver. I know he's a pretty big name free agent signing for the Patriots, but I expect him to play a pretty big role in this game this season. Brandon Marshall said on Inside the NFL this week that Chris Hogan is a monster. That's some high praise coming from a very talented wide receiver. So I'm definitely expecting big things from Hogan.
Well, we're going to get more into the matchups with Kurt Warner, but hey, Doug, when you mentioned Ninkovich, what was your reaction to that news? I know I was shocked.
Yeah, I was extremely surprised. And, it's unfortunately for Ninkovich, well, I guess that's the wrong way of putting it. It's definitely an unfortunate situation for Ninkovich because he loses 4 paychecks. He kind of loses that reputation. But it kind of worked out pretty well for the Patriots, especially if they were going to lose him for those 4 games anyway due to the torn tricep, because that opened up a roster spot and that allowed them to keep maybe a guy like Clay Harbor or a guy like DJ Foster or a linebacker like a Landon Roberts for 4 weeks just to add some depth to the roster. So, yeah, it's certainly unfortunate for Ninkovich, but I'm not sure if Bill Belichick was really cursing too much when he saw that suspension came down.
Now, I know you don't know for sure. There's no way really for any of us to know for sure. But what do you think the real story was? Because, of course, he comes out and says that he didn't know that a supplement he was taking had some ingredient in it that was a banned substance. And, of course, that's what we hear from athletes all the time. We just heard it from UFC fighter John Jones back in July. You hear it all the time. And honestly, any experience I've had with Rob Ninkovich, I mean, he certainly does seem like a very high character type of guy. The quotes that he came out with, coming from a guy like him, I almost, you buy it, but it's at the same time, like I said, you hear it from athletes all the time, and it's like you scratch your head and it's kind of like, how did you not know? Yeah,
I don't want to say I don't trust Ninkovich. I don't want to call him a liar. I think that, that's his word, so that's pretty much what we have to trust. But it does seem a little convenient that every single time a guy fails a drug test or a PED test, that it's always some supplement that they bought at GNC that had a chemical or something in it that they didn't know about and that shows up on a test. It's hard to believe when that is the excuse that every single athlete uses every single time they take fail a drug test. In this circumstance, you really want to believe Ninkovich. You can choose to believe him. You cannot choose to believe him, but it just does seem kind of odd that that's always what causes it. It's never something real.
Right. Well, certainly an unfortunate situation, but I know one of the things he did say, too, is he'll be ready to go when he does come back. So lots to look forward to after the Patriots' first 4 games of the season. We'll get Ninkovich back, Brady back. So
exactly.
That will all be well and good. But as for week 1, let's know what Kurt Warner has to say. Michaela Vernava, it's a pleasure of being joined on the line by Kurt Warner, a man who I think requires no further introduction, but he is, of course, former NFL quarterback turned NFL Network analyst, whom you can catch every Sunday on NFL Network, NFL Game Day Morning, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. Kurt, thanks so much for being with us today.
You bet. Good to be on.
Well, I'm super excited for every Game Day Morning, but especially for this week 1 matchup Sunday between the Patriots and the Cardinals. And I have to jump right out and ask, I know you are going to have a good perspective on what Jimmy Garoppolo will be going through this week, having been in a similar situation, although the circumstances were different with Trent Green being injured. But what is Jimmy G thinking? What is he feeling going into this week?
Well, I think, there's the one side that's extreme excitement. Remember being in that position where you waited so long and you worked so hard to get to this point. And, for me, it was unfortunate it came at an injury. For Jimmy, I'm sure he would have rather had a different situation than Tom being suspended. But regardless, you get your opportunity, and here's your chance on the big stage to go out and prove to people that you belong and that you can play at this level. So there's extreme excitement I'm sure from that standpoint. There's also that nervousness. I mean, you're nervous before every game, but I think the different thing with Jimmy's situation is that there's extremely high expectations for this football team. That it's not kind of, well, you can just kind of grow into the position and then we'll just see what happens. You know, when I was with the Rams, nobody really expected us to do anything. We were 4-12 the year before. So it's completely different. Is you're keeping the seat warm till Tom Brady, best quarterback ever, takes over again. But we have expectations of winning the Super Bowl again. And you've got 4 games to help us live up to those expectations. So I think that's probably the most difficult part for Jimmy, is to be able to manage those things and understand that he's in the shadow of a legend. And this team, you know, is not expecting to lose any of these games, even though Tom's not at quarterback. And so it puts a lot of pressure on a young guy to have to play at a certain level. And if things go bad or if they lose a game, to be able to manage that situation. Because I think a lot of people are, well, he's screwing this thing up, you know, is kind of the mentality that a lot of fans could have because they have Super Bowl aspirations for this team. And so I think that's the most difficult part for Jimmy and probably what he's feeling now. But I'm sure that's that's overwhelmed with the excitement of finally getting a chance to play in the NFL, to start, and to be playing for a very good team where you don't feel like you have to do everything yourself.
And then I'm sure you've probably heard the rumblings that's been going on in New England of an alleged rift between Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo. What is your take on those rumors? Do you think there's any truth to it? And does Tom Brady have a responsibility to get Jimmy Garoppolo ready to take over for him for the first 4 weeks?
Well, I mean, you know, just knowing Tom personally, I find it hard to believe that, that there's really any kind of rift at all. The one thing that I'll say is we all know Tom's a competitor. And Tom wants to compete. He wants every rep. He wants to be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots until he retires at whatever age, 45 or whatever. He's a competitor. And when competitors get between the lines and get on a football field, they have a focus and a mindset. And they're not really worried about, is everybody around me happy? Am I doing everything to kind of, coddle or pat everybody on the back? I'm here to do my job and to do it as best as I can. And I think that's very much how Tom is. So I think sometimes things can come off like he doesn't care. He's not trying to help Jimmy. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's more, this is my mindset. I'm on the field. I'm getting myself prepared. And, but I would be very hard pressed to believe Tom Brady isn't doing whatever he can to help Jimmy and to help this team succeed for those 4 weeks he's not there, so they're in the best possible position when he comes back to, make another Super Bowl. That's what it's all about. So I don't make a lot of that stuff, especially when it comes down to competitors. Everybody's got their take on different competitors and what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. I just believe, knowing Tom, that he's going to do everything he can to help Jimmy. And also knowing, and again, not necessarily selfish, I think he would help Jimmy to be the best quarterback he can. But knowing that helping Jimmy be the best he can be for these 4 games helps his team be in position when he takes back over to accomplish the things that he wants to accomplish this year. So, I try not to read too many things into those. I've heard too many rumors over the past that I know aren't founded in the full truth or don't really understand the circumstances. So, so I don't put a lot of faith in those kinds of things.
Now, since you know Tom personally, he hasn't let on to any of the media here what he'll be doing during his suspension. What is your best guess as to how he will be spending that time that he has to be away from the team?
Yeah, we were actually, just kind of talking about this on our Game Day morning show yesterday. Just what do you do during 4 weeks? For people that don't understand, is that he gets to have no contact with his team, no foot set in the building, and how hard that is for a competitor at this time of year wanting to play. But just knowing that, I have to believe that Tom's got something set up where he is going to be able to simulate as much as he possibly can to make himself as ready as he possibly can be when Week 5 comes around. And I don't know what that looks like. You know, we were kind of speculating. I mean, you'll get a bunch of high school kids. I mean, I don't know what that looks like and how you set it up. So you're trying to get some kind of semblance of reading coverages and making decisions and honing your craft so you're ready, because 4 weeks off is a long time off from being with your guys and being in the room and playing football in that type environment and having to jump right into the regular season. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I have to believe that he's got a plan in place to help him, to stay as ready as possible under the circumstances.
And now when you look at what Bruce Arians has done with the Cardinals defense as a quarterback, what would scare you most about playing against that defense, and especially for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo who isn't as experienced as Tom Brady?
I think the biggest thing is there's a lot of unknowns with this defense. They do a lot of different things. They'll throw a lot of things at you, and you have to kind of be really in tune to what you're seeing, where the weaknesses are, when they do blitz, when they throw different looks at you. I think now, a guy that they know, very, very well in Chandler Jones has joined the team, and he's going to be a guy that's going to be rushing the passer, something that they haven't had from a Cardinal standpoint, defensive standpoint, in a while, a guy that can really get after the passer. So that's another dynamic with this team, is so multiple on the back end. Got a guy like Patrick Peterson that can lock down any receiver. They do a lot of things and a lot of ball hawks outside of that. And then you couple that with a pass rush. I just think this defense has a chance to be even better, and I think that's a hard thing for Jimmy Garoppolo in his first game, is you're going to see a lot of different things and a lot of different blitzes thrown at you. You got to recognize, see it, and get the ball out quick and make good decisions with it. That's going to be the biggest challenge for him this week.
And what kind of game planning do you think we'll see from Bill Belichick and the Patriots with Jimmy Garoppolo driving the ship?
I think you're going to stay with a lot of what they always do. I mean, we talk about the New England offense and kind of the way it's designed. It's designed inside out, meaning it's built around those big tight ends and the backs that they have in the passing game more than it is stretch the field and throw it down the field. I think that helps a young quarterback, that we're not asking you to hold the ball and wing it down the field all the time. I think they play, we call it kind of small ball, but a lot of their passes are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, 5 to 10 yards, working Julian Edelman underneath, working Gronk underneath. You get Martellus Bennett now. Those things help because you design a lot of your plays to be quick hitters, to get the ball out of your hands and get it into your playmaker's hands so you can stay ahead of the chains. So I think they're going to stick with that philosophy. I think it helps a young quarterback if he knows what he's seeing. I think it takes the pressure off of him to have to make big-time throws, and it's more just make the easy throws and let your guys, because we got enough of those guys, let them make plays for you. So I don't think they have to change a lot of what they're doing for Jimmy Garoppolo. They can stay kind of status quo and use their skill players the way that they've built that team, as opposed to changing it and saying, oh, we need to do something completely different because Tom's not there and Jimmy is.
Kurt, great insight. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
Great stuff from Kurt Warner, NFL Network analyst. You can see Kurt every Sunday on NFL Network, NFL Game Day morning starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. And hey, Doug, I know this is the part of the podcast where you and I usually chat about some things going on around the league, but with all the Colin Kaepernick, Bruce Miller stuff, sort of a circus going on out in San Francisco. So I got a chance to talk with 49ers beat writer Matt Barrows, who really has the lowdown on the situation. So if it's cool with you, let's just take a listen in on what he had to say.
Absolutely. I will let Matt touch those issues.
I'm joined on the line now by Matt Barrows, 49ers beat writer for the Sacramento Bee. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. A lot has been going on in San Francisco.
Yes, to say the least. It's been quite busy the last 10, 14 days.
A lot of off on-field issues, which sort of creates a circus-like atmosphere, I have to imagine. With the news, the Bruce Miller news today, how much of a shock was that?
It was a shock. Bruce Miller is very well liked within the locker room. Chip Kelly has created a leadership council where each position group elects one leader. So the defensive line, for example, elected Glenn Dorsey, and the offensive line elected Joe Staley, and the tight ends elected Bruce Miller, which he was a fullback last year, so he wasn't even a tight end. So that tells you a little bit about his status in the locker room. And he wasn't going to be a big offensive player for this team, but he was going to have a role on special teams. But my point is that he was well liked and charismatic, and the last person you would think would get into a situation like this. And there was a video going today that showed a bloody and drunk, obviously inebriated Bruce Miller stumbling around that night, and it's just kind of hard to watch, shocking to watch, and frankly sad to watch. His career probably is over, certainly in San Francisco.
Yikes! Yeah, not a good situation. And what does that do for the other guys in the locker room, especially now that you say that he's in such a leadership role?
Well, sadly, the 49ers have been through this. Lots of guys who were in a similar spot, well-respected, well-liked in the locker room, no longer are around. Ray McDonald is one. Alden Smith is another. So, unfortunately, they've been through this process before, and I think the fact that it happened before the season, allows them to sort of get going. Without Bruce Miller, like I said, he wasn't going to play a pivotal role on offense. So that's I don't want to say a saving grace, but that's something that will allow them to get get going a little bit more easily, and as opposed to somebody who was in a playing a big role for this team on offense or defense.
Now, when you say that Chip Kelly has emphasized the importance of leadership among his team, how big of a role does Colin Kaepernick have in terms of being a leader?
Well, he didn't have a very big role. And in fact, Bruce Miller was one of the guys that sort of stepped forward in the locker room when the anthem protest was such a big news item. And he said very, very good things about Kaepernick and very rational things about respecting his right to protest and recognizing what it was that Kaepernick is protesting. Kaepernick mostly has been injured this year, and Blaine Gabbert has sort of assumed that mantle. And of course, it'll be Blaine Gabbert who starts Monday against the Rams. But people players have begun to rally around Kaepernick on this issue. You saw Eric Reed doing so the other night in San Diego, and there have been some other players, Anthony Davis, a starter at guard, who have voiced their support as well. So I think it's something that seems to be growing. And now how big it grows is anyone's guess. It certainly would be bigger if Kaepernick were the starter. He's the number 2 right now, but a lot of people predicted that this would split the locker room and that Kaepernick would be isolated, ostracized. That certainly has not happened. In fact, I think it's going in the opposite direction right now.
Interesting. But the way that he has chosen to deliver his message and be public about it is a very polarizing choice, sitting for the anthem. You say that he hasn't been ostracized, but has it been created a rift at all in the locker room? I have to imagine there must be some guys that aren't exactly keen to it.
I think there are a lot of guys that aren't exactly keen to not standing during the national anthem, which you're right is obviously polarizing. We've seen that on a national scale. But like I said, that happened on a Friday night, a game against Green Bay out here. And then on Sunday, the players had a day off on Saturday. Then on that Sunday, they all had this big players-only meeting that I was describing, that in which these leadership council figures got up and spoke, and to a person, I think it was a very productive meeting where people spoke their minds, and Kaepernick was invited to speak as well, and he spoke so passionately about the subject that I think it swayed a lot of people as far as seeing where he was coming from and understanding what he was doing. Now, is the whole team going to be kneeling with him before the Rams game on Monday? No, that's not going to happen. But I think more people are accepting of the way he did it than they were perhaps when he first started doing it. So people are talking, communicating, and I think that's the key to this whole thing. And like I said, he's got more support now than he did a couple of weeks ago when the players at least recognized what he was doing.
What about the socks, though, that he wore that with pigs, with policemen depicted as pigs? Now, I know that the photos of those socks were actually from early August. They weren't right after the anthem protest began. But a very, again, I don't know the word exactly, interesting way to express your feelings on something. Did that rub any of his teammates the wrong way?
I haven't heard about that. There have been other things that have popped up since then, unfortunately, that have been occupying our time. I think one of the themes, Eric Reed is the guy that knelt next to Kaepernick in San Diego, and Eric Reed is a well-respected player on this team. He's the 49ers union representative, and I think Reed took it upon himself to go to Kaepernick and to try to figure out as you noted, a less polarizing way to go about this process. And I think part of that is not wearing socks like that and tweeting out things that for lack of a better term are more shock value than actual substantial substantive discussions on the topic, and I think that's what Reed and Nate Boyer, the ex-Green Beret, were trying to do. You've got a legitimate argument here. There's a true message that you're trying to send. Let's try to send it in a way that doesn't shock so many people and doesn't turn so many people off initially. And I think pig socks fall into that category.
Absolutely. And since you mentioned the shock value, you're familiar with the team. I need to ask, there were a lot of people nationwide that said, he's doing this for shock value, that maybe he's doing this to have his time in the spotlight because that time is sort of waning for him, is what a lot of people seem to think right now, that he isn't in the spotlight and maybe he's just doing this for personal attention. Can you speak to that at all?
He's done a lot of things in that vein. So it's a natural reaction to Colin Kaepernick, a guy who kisses his biceps, et cetera, et cetera. Is the star of television advertisements where he's sort of got everybody against him and he's receding into his headphones, that type of thing. It's understandable, and I think a lot of people had that initial reaction. He has spoken very passionately and clearly about social issues, racial issues in this country, and I think that's what swayed a lot of his teammates. That's what swayed a lot of outside observers. That's why his jersey is taking off right now. I think if people recognize his passion, that it's not a flash in the pan type of thing. It's something that he obviously has thought about. That's why I think people are slowly but surely coming to his side on this issue.
Now, overall, how well equipped do you think the Niners are heading into their first game, heading into this season, given everything that's been going on?
Well equipped encompasses a lot of things, including the talent level on the field, and I think it's clear that they're deficient in some key areas. Wide receiver is one of them. If they get an injury to their starting tailback, Carlos Hyde, that's going to be a problem as well. So there's some red flags on this team. I think that they're capable of surprising some people, maybe even the Rams on Monday night, with this new offense, with some new talent on the offensive and defensive lines. But as a whole, as a team, I don't think the Kaepernick issue is going to affect this team on the field. I think that this team could run into some problems this year, but it'll be roster issues, not internal strife type of issues.
Has Chip Kelly's philosophy been well received there?
Yeah, it has. I think that Chip Kelly has softened some of the things that drew attention and were controversial in Philadelphia. He seems to have learned from mistakes or missteps, or just kind of evolving as an NFL coach. So right now, everybody's on board. Obviously, players were saying the same things in Philadelphia in 2013. So the question is, what happens when this 49ers team hits a rough patch? And it's almost inevitable that they'll have one or two or three of those this season. They've got one of the hardest schedules that are in the toughest division in the NFL. So that's going to happen. Will the 49ers still be on board with Chip Kelly in October, November, December? That remains to be seen, but to a man so far, the Chip Kelly has to be pleased with, and again, it goes back to the leadership on this team. It's just a good locker room in a lot of ways. Are kind of walking in his footsteps, doing what he wants, and it's so far everything has been good for Chip Kelly.
It will be interesting to see how it plays out. Matt, before I let you go, I just need to ask, there has been speculation that Colin Kaepernick actually might not be on this roster for much longer. What do you think about that?
It's funny. Chip Kelly said the other day very clearly that Colin Kaepernick is the number 2 quarterback. That means that, Colin Kaepernick's going to be in uniform, be the backup to Blaine Gabbert when the season begins. So, as long as Chip Kelly is making that decision, it seems like, he's been saying all along that, Colin Kaepernick is one of his 2 best quarterbacks. They had a quarterback competition throughout the off season, that he's going to be the guy who, if Blaine Gabbert gets hurt or, if Blaine Gabbert runs into issues, is going to be, on the field. And, it's an interesting predicament for this team, because they would owe him another $14.5 million next year if he suffers a serious injury, and he suffered a couple of them this past season. So it's a pickle that this team has to figure out. Right now, they seem to be acquiescing to Chip Kelly and what he wants, and it's clear that Chip Kelly thinks that he's one of the 2 best quarterbacks on the team right now.
Do you think there's really any chance we see him get his starting job back without Blaine Gabbert getting injured? Do you think there's a chance he just reclaims that role?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, Chip Kelly from the very start, since he was hired here in January, has been curious as to what Colin Kaepernick can do in his offense and what he can bring Colin Kaepernick. Can he resurrect Colin Kaepernick's career? So I mentioned rough patches earlier in this conversation. The 49ers have some very tricky parts of their schedule, and I just wonder whether if Blaine Gabbert plays a certain number of games, 6 games say, and Chip Kelly doesn't like what he sees, does he bring Colin Kaepernick in at that point and see what he has in Kaepernick? The 49ers have to make a decision about their quarterback this year. Blaine Gabbert's not signed beyond this season. Colin Kaepernick is making an awful lot of money next year if he's on the roster after April 1. So I think that Chip Kelly really wants to see these guys, both of these guys, for an extended period running his offense in order to make that decision for 2017 and beyond.
Again, it will definitely be interesting to see how things play out in San Francisco. I'm looking forward to it. And Matt Barrows, I can't thank you enough for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, that'll do it for this week's edition of Between the Tackles. Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at Michaela Vernava. Follow Doug on Twitter at Doug Kyed, and make sure to tune back in next week.